90% of the time, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
It's not. It's
Gets the people going.
You are now listening to Diagnonsense
Then we would just be idiots saying nonsense.
with Kurt Hoenack
Damn it.
and Isaac Smoldon.
I am also here. I'm not a big goblin guy. I am a lizardman guy at Blood Bowl. I've started playing Blood Bowl on the computer. It's the ultimate game of fantasy football where you have different teams of Warhammer fantasy races.
I saw an ad for it,
and I'm a big lizardman guy.
Yeah.
Ian, shout out to Ian. I'm paying him $30 to 3D print me my lizardmen models. And I'm pretty excited. You know, you've got linebackers that have decent movement and agility, but don't get injured. They're like orcs, except they can run the ball way better because they've got the skinks in there, the little lizard dudes.
Yeah.
Run on, they're like the run on water basilisk lizards, except they just, they just pick up the ball and go. And good luck stopping them with your, high elf team or whatever you got. We're just gonna pound the rock. We're just gonna play some old school football with the lizardmen. Thank you for tuning into Diagnonsense. We're not talking about more Warhammer fantasy races today. We can only get away with that once every 2 years, so we're putting that topic back into hibernation. But we do have something, probably a little bit of a shorter episode today, so we can set up a gigantic episode with both of our two guests that's on a movie the next time we record. But this is a conversation that I think both of us have had independently. It's come up at Coffee with the Mayor a couple of times, and I also think that it has it's like a bipartisan supported issue. It's something that everyone can agree on, and yet we don't have any movement, it seems like, at least locally, or I don't really hear it in the public discourse a lot, talking about some social welfare reform. Whoa.
Whoa.
It's pretty out there for us. But we like to fix all the world's problems in one go on this podcast. If everyone would just run the world according to Diagnonsense, Kurt and I could really benevolent dictatorship.
Dictatorship.
Yeah. Both that's why Rome had two praetors.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just one of us is a left-hand magician, one of us is a right-hand magician, and we solve all the world's problems through our benevolent dictatorship.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we live in a society. Insert Joker meme. No, so this is something that, obviously, Kurt, you're on the kind of in the trenches when it comes to, as a client navigator, you're having a lot of, conversations with clients just in the car, in the building, and as someone who filled in for you when you took a vacation for a month, I've had some of those conversations too.
Yeah.
It seems to come up a lot because, I think when it comes to our clients, and I certainly don't want to generalize, and I'm not deigning to speak for all of our clients, but we absolutely have some people that need medical, food and other government service benefits just based off of the background that they're coming out of. We deal with some severe traumatic situations here at my house. What I like about this subject is I think both sides of the political spectrum, no matter kind of where your background is, I think everyone can agree that when you're talking about a client that has an ACEs score of 8 that comes into our program, there's not going to be a whole lot of people that are going to say, yeah, they, why can't they just pay for full medical and who is pregnant or needing medical services because of some of those traumatic experiences. There's not a lot of people that are going to say, oh yeah, they don't need medical services. I don't know if you've looked at purchasing medical insurance, Kurt. I get to be on my mommy and daddy's for another year at this point. The clock's running out.
I've been paying my medical insurance, and let me tell you, it is not something that I look forward to every year.
Yeah, my ACEs score is 0. I would not have medical insurance if it was not for my parents right now. I'd risk it for the biscuit, honestly. It's insane. It's tough for the average.
Well, it's expensive whether you use it or not. So,
And that's our medical system in general is also a pretty polarizing topic that we don't need to get into. But again, I think everyone can agree, there are people in our society that need these medical benefits, that need meal assistance, that type of stuff. The problem is where we start to get divided is, no one wants to take services away or a lot of people, anytime you start talking about social welfare reform, it turns into this very black and white thing where maybe one side's like, we got too many people suckling off the government teat, cut them all off. And you got the other side that's like, we are letting people die in the sewers. Can someone help these people out? And we really lose, I feel like we really lose the plot. This is what we were talking about at Coffee with the Mayors. I really feel like we're losing the plot, because if we can provide these, and we were using SSI as an example, if we can provide SSI to those who need it, and then incentivize people to, one, work, but also you still let them receive their benefits, and it's a tapering system rather than what it is right now, like locally, where it's just like,
right.
Oh, you're finally back on your feet. You've done your 12-step NA. You were addicted to fentanyl, and now you're off fentanyl. And
what was funny is I got a text about this out of the blue, and it wasn't even it didn't have anything to do with this conversation or any of the conversations we had at the mayor's meeting, where like the problem is we make too much. We're in this weird spot right now where
you make too much to get the services.
Yeah.
But you don't make enough to pay for decent medical coverage
and
food and utilities.
And it was funny because you had mentioned doing this podcast with me, and this person just out of the blue was I was like, well, can you do this? Can you do that? And it was like, well, the problem is we'd be cut off from the benefits for that. So it sounds like it's happening to a lot of people.
It's not just our clients, but
right.
But it creates this catch-22 situation where if you have someone that they're clean and sober, they were addicted to fentanyl, they got clean and sober, they went to the courts, they were able to get their kids back. They're like, I completed this job training program at my house. I'm out working in the community. And then we are like, great, you're doing all that. Good job. Hey, by the way, you owe $4,000 in medical bills for your kids. And also, we're taking your food assistance away because you're making too much money.
It's almost like you punish people to do the right thing.
Right. And I'll call it out. The right side of the political spectrum, they love to...
Hot take. No, I'm just kidding.
They love to point the finger... They love to point the finger at people that are on long-term, SSI, meal assistance benefits, and go, look at all these lazy people. If they would just get out there and work, blah, blah, blah. And you miss the fact that it is the most financially responsible thing for these people to just continue to get the benefits that they're getting in the short term. And I will say in the short term, because in the long term, yes, if you can work your way up, at a job, eventually, get better and better pay, get some job experience, get education. Yeah, okay, that's better for you in the long run. But in the short term, that doesn't make any sense, because now you're going to end up paying way more of your individual money by trying to go, work your way up the corporate ladder than if you just continued to get your benefits, made sure that your kids, in a lot of cases, had food, medical, and some of the people that are in that position, they won't last 5 years to get to the other side.
Yeah. Well, and when I think, what comes to my mind is like the most vulnerable people, which are the people with high ACEs scores who come from multi-generational poverty or drug use already. And
how do you see the forest through the trees when you've been fighting your whole life just to survive?
So, because how do you make it more equitable? Because I feel like right now, from my perspective, I think it's hard for government to do that to begin with. So
it's hard for the federal government to help each individual person to the perfect amount. Yeah, I agree.
Right. Because it's
not a simple,
it's a hammer kind of a thing.
Right.
When you have a screw. And
I'm not saying, again, we love to fix all the world's problems. I'm on this podcast. I'm not saying that this is we could just be doing this
No,
tomorrow.
no, I
but
know.
I do think it's a conversation that we need to have
It's an important conversation because, one of the things that comes up is for some people is like, well, I've got this disorder. I've had a neuropsych. Shouldn't I just be on SSI, or disability? One of the conversations I have is like, well, hold on a second. If you're functioning and you're doing good enough, I had multiple mental health disorders. I'm sure if I would have pushed to try and get disability that I could have, but I said, when we have this conversation with people, I say the problem with that is that, I know they always say like, well, don't let the stigma of mental health affect you, and don't let like like you have bipolar, you're not bipolar kind of a thing. If you have the means to not be on disability and work out of that, it's a better solution, because I think the framework is flawed. I mean, I think that the disorders, the way they're diagnosed, is flawed. Just last week, Mad in America posted that the authors of the DSM-5 TR had received millions of dollars in contributions from pharmaceutical companies. So there's a huge conflict of interest there, and that's a whole nother episode. And I feel and there's probably a DSM episode that we've talked about. There is, but I guess the long and short of what I want to say is like, for people that they've been diagnosed for a relatively short amount of time, it's like, I can't make medical recommendations, right? But people need to look at that critically and do their own research on that, and not fall into the trap of, I'm disabled, as tempting as it is. I mean, it's tempting even when you're far out from withdrawal. There's a temptation to kind of like be comfortable, and the system, you're right though, the system is not equitable in that it doesn't, it's kind of like a cliff that you're either, you get, if you're getting the money and you're getting all the things to go from that to like complete independence, it's not
cold turkey.
There's no, it doesn't feel equitable. And I think the dangers of that too, are that, you have this labeled disorder that, according to governments, and because we're not the only government that does, diagnose people out of the DSM, right, is that, you're this thing, you fall into this category of human being. And I just don't, part of my motivation for getting off of medications and stuff is I didn't want that label, because the whole time I had treatment and made my situation worse, and I think that there's a real danger of giving away your power, as we were talking about with Linda, giving away your power and giving away your own personal authority over what you are as a human being or who you are.
No, and that you definitely raise a fair point. I think that's the other side of that argument too, right? Is, the first point I raised is maybe one side of the political spectrum is a little too harsh about the fact, like, hey, my point is that, hey, there are people that need these services
that benefit greatly,
greatly, and eventually that leads to them having the chance to become,
right,
a functioning, contributing member of the economy, if that's how you want to look at it from a dollars and cents perspective. You raise a fair point as well, is that, do we have a lot of people in this country specifically that are on disability that maybe, shouldn't qualify or don't necessarily need that if they were forced to go out and continue to kind of,
if the system was more accurate and equitable to evaluate them at a level,
right,
that is, and I don't want to say that like the learned helplessness is a real thing. I mean, you can be in that situation but be capable of more, but because like for me, like I was put on all these drugs, and the expectation was like, okay, you've got this severe mental illness. If you have to be disabled for the rest of your life, my family was willing to take that on. Like, if you can't work and do all this stuff, but it's like, and I wasn't always certain, right? Like I wasn't always certain that I could even drive, right? Which is funny now, because I drive for a job. But if the ground that we start off at is like, you're permanently disabled and there's no equity to move up, and there's no, there's no expectation to grow. And that was suffocating for me.
I think what I like about this topic, the reason I wanted to do kind of just like a shorter episode, like introducing this topic, is that this is one of the maybe political topics in our country right now where I truly believe that the middle ground between both, extreme points of view is actually like where the best solution could be found, right?
Well, so everybody feels like we could do better.
Right. Because then, okay, I think everyone having a reasonable conversation about this can acknowledge, hey, some people really need these type of services. And everyone that's having a reasonable conversation about this can say, we have probably some people that are taking advantage of this or that have the ability to move up or from maybe would at least have the ability to consider going into a job, working their way up, if we didn't have, like you described, this cliff or hammer of how our current system works. And so the idea of these tapering services where we can continue to provide financial and meal assistance support to the people that need it, while also incentivizing them to go out, find a job, be involved in their community. I think in the long run, you spend maybe, and it doesn't have to be like a 1-to-1, you're making this dollar amount at your job, so we're taking away that equivalent amount. You could even provide, I think, more government services in the short term, more assistance in the short term financially. I have a minor in business administration. I've taken like 4 upper level economics classes. I'm not, this is backed up by, I'm pre-arguing already. But if you provide a little more money in the short term, I feel like there is the chance that, or a good chance that you in the long term have people that are actively contributing to the economy more because they were able to work their way up while still taking care of their kids, their medical, their utilities.
What you're making is like the quality argument where you invest a certain amount into a person and then you get a better long-term return.
I mean, it's just like an investment.
I think we've done a really poor job at doing that for our young people. Right. Because if you start somebody off at, you're going to be permanently disabled for the rest of your life, you're going to have to take all these drugs. If the drugs aren't working for you, we're going to give you more drugs. I mean, that is not, to me, that's not an investment. That's like you're a liability and we don't want to deal with you. I mean, that's how I was felt.
I think
that's how I felt.
I think that sentiment is maybe how our local system currently works is you're a liability. We don't want to deal with you. We're going to spend this amount of money so that you just get the hell out of our way and just stay in your house that we're completely paying for, with the food that we're completely paying for, and the medical that we're completely paying for.
Right, just get out of the way.
Don't try to better yourself. Don't try to get involved with your community. That's fine.
You can only do that for so long.
You can only do that for so long. And meanwhile, you have, that's maybe a more the extreme version of what happens if you go to that extreme left side. And meanwhile, you have the extreme right side that's saying, why don't we have anyone that wants to work? Why don't we have anyone that wants to work? Please work. And they're pointing, right? They point at that totem of like, see all these people that are just on the government benefits not working. And it's because they're not willing to. We have right now, we're in a position where we can't find some common ground between those two extremes and make a system where people are incentivized to work while getting their base needs met because of the generational trauma that they have undergone for their entire life. And I don't want to make it strictly money, dollar and cents conversation, but I think that that's really how you can win the hearts and minds of the decision makers here is if you're willing to invest into people and help them in the short term, help them cover that 5 years of I'm working my way up the corporate ladder, I'm getting the job training, I'm getting the work experience that I need to have a career, then in the long term, they get to that career, they're able to survive that 5 year period, help, provide for themselves, provide for their family. And now they have disposable income that is injected directly back into the economy. And in the long term, their tax dollars more than cover the amount of benefits that they received.
Yeah, I mean, by a long shot. I mean, the cost of mental health care and incarceration versus just keeping people out of
that's a huge
when
piece
we
of
were
this
running
too,
statistics, right? I can't remember a few years ago, and we were like comparing the cost of incarceration versus, you know, paying people to not be in jail. And it was like, but that's where, yeah, I mean, I feel like we've done a huge disservice to people where we've created this kind of disaster economy where, you know, there's just, it bottoms out.
So Smoldon Hoenack 2024,
2024.
Platform you can get behind. This and Blood Bowl is now the national sport. We're gonna have televised Blood Bowl games.
Become South Korea.
That's our platform.
StarCraft. Yeah.
South Korea. I mean, that is they do play some pretty mean StarCraft.
Yeah,
if we're being honest, they play the crap out of some StarCraft. I mean.
Will.
I've still my tactics are still not advanced enough to even begin competing on the professional StarCraft circuit.
It's pretty hard.
But one of these days we need to, you know, we've got a lot of fun projects coming up this year. I want to get some video game streams going soon. I want Kurt and I to be playing some StarCraft. I've been just grinding Madden. And I'm getting to the point where I think I'm going to be able to take on Brian in some Madden around the Super Bowl or something.
It's exciting.
We have some job training videos that are coming out. We had a really great our first one's on insubordination in the workplace, and it's filmed all using interns and staff members here at my house. But you can use it in your own workplace. I think it's applicable to more than just my house. We're going to have more of those coming out. We got a lot of great video projects that are cooking, a lot of exciting stuff. So yeah, 2024, baby. Let's roll.